you don't know exactly when an author might publish something. So the very best person to contact, again, is someone from a publishing house. There are, I think if you just do a Google search of publishing houses and then a little bit of digging to find editors, you can send an email introducing yourself and so on, giving a link to your portfolio and so on, and, mentioning that you would love to take on a cookbook project if any become available. So I think that would be the best bet to spread the word about your desire that you want to shoot a cookbook.
This is your host, Dyutima, but you can call me DJ. And I love to inspire food photographers to dream. I spent 15 years as an architect studying buildings and constructing hospitals before taking the biggest leap of faith of my life, which was setting up a food styling and food photography business right from scratch. If you're a dreamer like me, wanting to start a new photography business or grow your existing food photography business, jump right into a world where I share practical, actionable strategies to improve your photography skills, to work with clients, make more money, all with a fearless mindset. This is the My Food Lens podcast, and we take you one step closer to your dreams. So let's go. Welcome to part 2 of our cookbook shoot series with Diana. I hope you enjoyed part 1, and if you didn't, please bookmark it so you can go back and listen to it. This one's going to be a little bit different than part 1 because we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of pricing. We're also going to talk about some of the considerations for printing. That's important, right? Especially it's a cookbook. We're going to talk about contingencies. We're going to talk about finding clients who want to shoot cookbooks, like publishing houses. And we're also going to discuss whether shooting cookbooks is a lucrative option for us food photographers or not. So there's a lot of interesting conversation coming up with Diana. Let's dive right in. So tell me, Diana, how would you... It's so complicated. I feel like pricing a cookbook is somewhat complicated. There's so many things to think about. Do you just look at the number of recipes? Do you look at the number of photos? Do you look at the days of shoot? Do you look at hours? I don't know. Do you look at the publisher? Do you look at, what are the considerations? So tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, pricing, as we know, is a very thorny subject. Always, I feel, in our community. And it's not because people don't want to share information, but because every project is so individual and so unique almost that it's hard to offer any sort of blanket statements about pricing.
So true.
And it took so long to understand that. But in terms of guidelines, absolutely. So what I consider is the number of final images that will be delivered, again, without being rigid about it, like you said. So we're going to agree on a range, kind of. So let's say, I'll say 65 to 70 images. So something like that. And then not being persnickety if that turns into 72 or anything like that. So the number of images, another important consideration is who will do the cooking, because I feel on projects, I know that this is part of the way you work as well, Dyutima, where if you have to do the cooking as well, that adds considerable chunk of time to the project. Whereas if someone else, if you go to a restaurant, that's the number of hours. You're there for 4 hours. You will shoot extra dishes. That's what it is. Maybe you will do the styling as well. That's that. But when you have to cook from scratch, you have to do the prep, the cooking and all of that. That adds a considerable chunk of time. So it's not at all the same whether you will have to cook 60 recipes or not have to cook 60 recipes of timing. So That would be another, like an important consideration as well. So number of images, who will do the cooking, how many other people are going to be on the team. So is the author going to have support with cooking? Does she expect you to support with the cooking? Is there going to be a food stylist, or you will do the food styling as well? These would be the biggest things. In terms of licensing, this wouldn't be a big, I mean, the licensing terms are pretty standard for books anyway. So this isn't where you, I feel, would make, money on the cookbook at all.
Right.
But yeah, those would be the most important considerations. And do they want you, for example, to rent props? Are they, because it depends on each photographer's circumstances. I'm very fortunate to have a collection of props that I've accumulated over years of doing this work. So I find that many of my clients have in my collection the stuff they need. And it also is part of the look that I create in my photos, right?
Yes.
But sometimes people will require additional props, and there needs to be an understanding of who will cover the cost of that if necessary, who will cover the cost of the ingredients. So those factors would come into the pricing. And also, do they expect you to hire out parts of the project? These would be, I think, the most crucial things to understand about the project. And in terms of, figuring out the pricing for it. And yes, it's very important, as always, with any inquiry when you're trying to create the pricing for it, to know very strongly your bottom line in terms of your business. What are your operating costs, and how to translate that into the price? So what are your costs going to be to keep the lights on in your business?
I have two questions. So one is that so you said that usually the authors would come with a vision. They usually have a vision, but you do have a collaborative process in which you are also developing the vision a little bit. You're refining, fine-tuning it. And that's where the mood boards come into play. You create the mood board, but the client has the flexibility. So something like that, does that get called out separately in the pricing, or would that be considered as, kind of taken for granted that this would be part of the process for a cookbook shoot?
I think that the way I would approach this is to have this conversation with the author and ask them whether they wanted you to do that part of the process as well, because everything that will take up time, we need to account for it in the pricing. That's my personal philosophy about this. I do consider it kind of part of the process, however. So normally when I price, and this is not just for the cookbooks, but also for pretty much any other project, I will say that, so I will give my client the price after understanding the scope of the project and the timelines and whatnot. I will give the price and I will say, okay, this includes me creating the mood board and kind of doing the art direction for this as well. And then, unless it's an agency. So for agencies, they will do the creative direction and the art direction as well. And our jobs as photographers insofar as agencies are concerned, is to just deliver sort of create the photo to the direction of the agency.
Yes.
But to the brief. But yes, for cookbooks, my personal experience has been that I sort of rolled that into the price without separating it out as a different service. It was part of the service of me doing the photography for the cookbook.
All right. But also depends on the client and the scope. So my other question would be, so let's say we have 100 photos, all right? And we have, let's say 20 recipes, but we're creating 100 photos because, like you said, one recipe has like multiple, all right? So let's say we are shooting sourdough bread. Let's do
Mhm.
that. All right.
Yeah.
And then so the client says, all right, I'm going to do this like my best sourdough recipe. And I want 5 photos for this. And one photo will be of the full loaf, one would be cut, just showing the inside. One of them would be a different angle. One of them would be portrait. One of them would be in landscape. And so there are these, some are minor variations of, whatever the food is. How would you say that would you count them as different, like in the count of the photos, each one would be counted separately? Or you'd count it like, okay, portrait landscape, I'm just going to count it as one because there isn't much variation? Or would you count it separately, like just in terms of getting a gauge? Because sometimes our recipes are only a few, but with the number of photos per recipe that we need to create is a lot. And that accounts for the volume of the work. So how do you compensate for that?
Yeah, so definitely I would count by the volume of work, because even though it seems like you're just turning the camera around from portrait to landscape, we know that it's actually far more than that. You basically have to recompose, restyle the whole scene completely when you want to switch angles, when you want to switch orientation. It's far more complex than just, turning the camera from vertical to
Yes.
horizontal. It's not like that at all. So I would definitely account for the volume, and I would say don't price by recipes. If there's tons and tons of process shots, then those are part of the work and those need to be accounted as well. So
Thank you for saying this. Thank you very much.
I think, especially if you're working with a publishing house directly, which was not my situation, but still the conversation about the license would be something that sort of trickles down from the publishing house, because publishing houses will have pretty sort of standard requirements in terms of what they require you to give them. So it would be a license in perpetuity so that they are able to print reruns of this book if it's needed, second editions and so on, if that is necessary. Um, it would have to cover the work being displayed in print, but also on digital media, because they might use the photos not just inside the book, but on social media to promote the book. And speaking of that, of course, they might use any photo in the book for things like book tour, marketing materials, that kind of promotional materials for the book itself. So your photos will be used for that as well, potentially. So the license just needs to cover that they have the right to use it in perpetuity, and probably, internationally, because most books are now,
Yes.
they are published and available all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, just to for the license to cover both digital media and print.
Mm-hmm. So if we had to talk about technical photography, if we really had to get into the lighting and the setup and, all of those things. So when we are talking about print media, especially like, that your photos are going to be in front of you the whole time, it's a bit unforgiving. So
Yeah.
yeah, like what would be some like absolute important considerations to keep in mind when we are shooting for something like a cookbook?
Something that's when you are at the shooting stage, I think just make sure that the lighting is working. And I mean, it would be kind of the same as for pretty much any other project where you have to have the lighting nailed. But you just have to make sure that, you are shooting in the whole frame that you are able to shoot, so that you're not going to have to crop significantly, from the page. At least that's how I try to do it. So if we need a crop, then I will shoot the I will just go closer
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
switch the lens if we need a close-up or anything like that, so that you are maintaining as much of the original pixels
Yes.
as
Yes.
possible.
Hmm.
So just, being mindful of that. You have to shoot in the dimensions that were given by the publisher. So this was something that we discussed at the beginning,
Hmm.
where the publishers gave us the dimensions of the book, and then I had to make sure that the images were all shot and kind of cropped to that
Hmm.
size.
Hmm.
So then
Yeah.
what I did, I basically created a crop, a specialized crop, and I saved it. And I'm a Capture One girl. So
Yes.
yeah, I just created a custom crop in Capture One that I saved
Right.
and that I used specifically for the book. So they will tell you the dimensions, and I just made sure that the images were all cropped to that size. And we had a second crop, which was for double pagers.
Hmm.
So for those, it was again a specific crop, and I just had to make sure to respect that as we were shooting the double page spreads.
Right. I love these tips because they're not just like, it's not just cookbook. I feel like even magazines, when you're shooting for magazines,
Yes.
pretty much like, because it's also print media or even digital magazines, the double pages or the center page
Mm.
these are so handy. Yes, carry on, Diana. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the thing that I considered while shooting. And then just to make sure that when you are editing, you are maintaining the integrity of the file, and that you are able to export it at the
Hmm.
resolution that they need. For print,
Hmm.
typically is 300 dots per inch. So 300 dpi is the normal resolution. And for me, on Ruth's cookbook, for sure, on the first one, exported in TIFF
Hmm.
format, which
Right.
is the standard file
Hmm.
that large scale printers can read. And
Right.
graphic designers who take care of the design work on the book after the photos are done, they might work with TIFF files as well.
Hmm.
So that might be a requirement that you export as TIFF files in the Adobe RGB color space.
Right.
So not your typical sRGB color space that we're using for digital media.
Amazing. I love this. This is so handy. I would just add one thing, and I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of folks miss that, and that is check the focus.
Oh, yes.
Make sure your subject, your hero is in focus, that you have not
Yeah,
missed it. It's stacked sharp, and that, once it gets blown up or scaled down or whatever, it's still, like you said, maintains that integrity, that sharpness, and it's not lost. I always feel like,
absolutely.
honestly, that's never happened to me, but I feel like it's my biggest fear.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
hear you. Yeah, but I think it's not just your biggest fear. I think that's the biggest fear of every photographer, and that's why tethering was
Mm,
sort of developed, because I'm
yes.
sure it happened to even the greats, that you have a fantastic image, but just the focus just wasn't nailed. And
Yes.
then, of course, you can only sharpen something that's already sharp. So
True.
you can't yeah, sharpening doesn't work on things that are out of focus. So
Yes.
um
Tethering is
yeah,
so
absolutely.
powerful. Tethering is
Yeah,
so
and
powerful, really.
I did that for both of the books, actually.
Hmm.
So
Hmm. And I'm
yeah.
sure it's like I do that for my clients, even when I'm in the restaurant or I'm in their venue. I'm sure it was so amazing for your client to be standing next to you, seeing you create that vision. And what you see in real life is so different from what you see through the lens. So finally
Yes.
seeing that photo up on the screen, to be standing, by your side, looking at those photos, I'm sure it adds, I feel, to the client experience. One,
Yes.
they are very comforted that their work, or their project is in the right hands. And
Hmm.
secondly, they can see it taking shape, that sense of satisfaction and that sense of, wow, this is going to become real. It's something else. So I feel
Mhm.
like tethering allows you to do all those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you said, it's reassuring for the client to see that their vision is actually getting translated into a photo and it looks good. And it also gives them an opportunity to, within limits
Mm-hmm.
to readjust if something is going, really south from what they imagined, then that is the point where things can still be changed.
Yeah. Talking about that, tell me what happens if there's a catastrophe on the during the shoot. So let's say, we have curveballs, things like the client is suddenly like, oh my God, I thought this would work out well, but I'm looking at these photos, they're not looking good. Or suddenly they're like, I just need to add 5 more recipes. So, suddenly your scope has changed, your timelines have changed, and there's just so much. So sometimes you're adding to the scope, sometimes you're redoing things. How should a photographer cope with these?
I think that in terms of scope creep, this is something that it's good to discuss ahead of time. So definitely have that conversation about the scope of the project. And when you are discussing that, perhaps it's not a bad idea for us to mention that, if the scope changes, then we might have to readjust in terms of
Mm,
pricing and deadline because delivering 10 recipes is not the same as delivering 20 recipes or images for them rather. So it's really important for everyone to be on the same page with that. So, having a contract is a good idea for situations such as these,
yes.
or even I never just sort of give out a number, but I create some sort of written record of that, whether that is a contract or whether that is just on my estimate. I put the terms and conditions on there, and it will be clear from this document what is the scope of the project and what are the conditions under which these images will be delivered. So
Mm-hmm.
within this time frame, and so on. So just to reassure everyone that the work is, getting done, but also as an assurance for yourself that the scope isn't going to turn from, like you said, from, I don't know, 15 recipes
Yeah.
to like 20 or 25 or something
Yeah.
like that. So yeah, just
Mm-hmm.
discussing that and helping the client understand that that will require an adjustment in pricing then.
Mm-hmm. Contracts are everything,
Mm.
everything. And I feel like they also make you look so professional. You know exactly how you're coming in, you're operating like a business. And I think the client also feels very reassured, also because it's not just safeguarding your interests and your terms, but also them. What if the
Yeah.
photographer, yeah, because what if the photographer backs out, or if there is a sickness in the family, or suddenly they cannot complete the project. There's so many things, so it's for both parties. So definitely a
Mhm.
absolute must for any project would be the contract. But tell me
Mhm.
one thing about, how do you ask the author to kind of credit you? Do you ask for it? Is that something you would add in a contract, like I would need the photography credits to be added in the cookbook? Or is that something that is just based on the generosity of the author? How does that work?
In terms of crediting you, I think that it isn't just a question of the author's generosity. I think it's also something that you can inquire about. So, at the beginning, in that first conversation about the scope of the project and their vision and all of that
Mm,
good stuff, you would also ask, how is the work going to be credited to me? So
mhm.
there's no right or wrong way, as far as I know, and it's kind of just how different publishing houses do it, how different, I think in Europe it's done differently than how it's done in North
Yes.
America, and so on. On European cookbooks, for example, I don't frequently see the photographer, I think, credited on the title
Mm,
page,
mhm,
but here in North America, I've seen it done, and that's how it was for
mhm.
the first book that I shot. So I'm credited as the photographer on the title page, but no matter what, there will exist mention of the name of the photographer in the book, because in the ISBN information that is either at the very beginning of the book or the very end of the book, depending. So wherever it will say that such and such author is credited as the creator of this work and they hold the copyright, and no part of this publication may be photocopied, sold, transmitted, and so on. And in that part, there will be mention of images are copyrighted to such and such. So the name of the photographer or photographers will be mentioned there in the ISBN information, because they are the copyright holders for the images inside the book. So say, for example, if you shot the recipes in the book, but someone else shot the back photo, which is the portrait of the author, then both photographers will be credited, because, like I said, so everyone who owns the copyright to any portion or anything that is in the book will be mentioned in that like ISBN section. But again, you can request, or you can discuss, or you can ask that your name be put on the title page as well, or wherever you want it to be mentioned.
I love this. Such great information, especially for someone who is, going to start a cookbook shoot or, take on. This is such great information. So, Diana, tell me, if someone is interested in shooting a cookbook and they don't have the network connections or a friend who bakes sourdough like them, then where should they go? Where should they go? Like, should they be reaching out to other food bloggers or maybe agencies or publishers? Like, what should their trajectory be to land a cookbook shoot project?
The best person to contact would be someone from a publishing house, because with pretty much everyone else, you don't know exactly when an author might publish something. So the very best person to contact, again, is someone from a publishing house. There are, I think if you just do a Google search of publishing houses and then a little bit of digging to find editors, you can send an email introducing yourself and so on, giving a link to your portfolio and so on, and, mentioning that you would love to take on a cookbook project if any become available. So I think that would be the best bet to spread the word about your desire that you want to shoot a cookbook. So I have worked with agencies, but not for cookbooks. So I'm not sure that they would be a good, I think they don't handle necessarily cookbook projects. And in terms of reaching out to people on social media or bloggers, the thing is that you never know. From an outside perspective, you never know when a blogger might have a cookbook in the pipeline. They aren't, for bloggers specifically, from my friends who are food bloggers, cookbooks aren't particularly lucrative projects for them compared to focusing their attention on their blogs. So, it's it might be something that they choose to take on, but many choose not to.
Not to, yeah, true.
Even while being super successful bloggers. So yeah, I would think it's more of a hit and miss with bloggers. So again, I think the best choice is publishing houses.
Yeah.
Magazines, if you want to see your work in magazines, then that is, find the resources that you enjoy consuming or looking through. If it's a magazine that you really love, reach out to them and offer to style or to shoot for them, and you never know what might just happen.
Yeah, and also if you're looking for publishers, like open your favorite cookbook or your favorite cookbooks, you'll find so many names there. And I feel like, like you said, if COVID has taught us one thing, it's about how to work remotely.
Absolutely.
So you were lucky that your client lived close by and she could drop off food, but Really, like there are so many cookbook projects that can still be executed remotely if you are skilled enough with cooking or you have someone on hand who can kind of assist you with it. So it's not just that you have to live in the same city or town as the client, it depends.
Absolutely. Yes, yes. And I know that there are photographers. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Eva Cosmas, I think she was mentioning at one point that she was flown to the location of the author so that they could work together for the duration of their cookbook shoot. That was
Mm,
a more like short term sort of thing, but she
right.
flew out, they took the photos, they worked on the images together, and the cookbook was born. So
Oh, wow.
definitely location is no longer a factor, I don't think, in this day and age, for sure.
Absolutely. So that
And
also, yes, go ahead, Dana.
no, I just wanted to say I want to encourage everyone to go for this. If this is something that you really want to do, go for it. Get to know the publishing industry, how it works, how do authors get deals, how do they get paid, how do they work on books. So get to know the publishing industry a little bit.
Mhm.
I mean, here, even at my local library, there's tons of cookbooks. I just need to go. I don't even need to buy anything or spend a
Yes.
single dollar. Just go to the library and see the publishing houses and start reaching out. That's always the key.
Yes, absolutely. But I do want to ask you something like really, 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 really deep down in your heart.
Yeah,
I
sure,
know
go
that
for it.
I know that we love seeing our work in print. And I know, like you said, how Eva traveled and through the duration of the shoot, she was there. And even for you, the cookbook shoot was kind of a long process compared to 1 day shoots, 2 day shoots that we do,
Yes, it
commercially.
was.
Yeah, it's a long process. It's slow. It's a lot of commitment. And in some ways, it's very rewarding when you see your photos, when you see your client satisfied. It's a very different feeling. But would you say that it's a financially lucrative career choice? Like, how would you compare it to maybe other commercial, food photography projects? Where does it fit in there? Or compare, with them?
Uh, in the big scheme of the revenue of my food photography business, I would not say that cookbooks are the money maker.
Yeah, yeah.
They're more of a heart and soul project. And sometimes people believe that authors must be making so much money with cookbooks, but unless it's, I don't know. I think maybe Shaquille O'Neal has a cookbook, maybe for him, because of simply the skill at the kind of celebrity that he is, in basketball. For people who are fans, like, so maybe, or like, if someone who is super famous otherwise writes a cookbook, then maybe for them it really becomes something lucrative. But for the majority of authors, I don't think it's a huge money maker for them as well. And it hasn't been in my business either. So while it is very rewarding, like you said, it's incredibly rewarding to see your work in print. But I think, from my perspective, that shooting cookbooks alone, I'm not sure if that would be sufficient to completely fund
Hmm.
your,
Hmm.
like,
That
to
could be
have,
the only thing you
yeah,
do.
the only thing that you
Yeah.
do. It is
Hmm.
possible that if you reach a level where you're getting one of these every, like, maybe 3-4 weeks, you're getting a cookbook contract, then maybe
Hmm.
um, it
Yeah.
could be a serious revenue generator in your business. But I think that, just in general, they aren't, for me, they haven't been huge money makers in my
Hmm.
business. And like you said, it is possible that with smaller and much more short-term projects, I could be generating, and I am generating, more revenue from commercial clients than from editorial. Editorial is, I don't know if this is if I'm just propagating mistaken belief, but I don't think so. I think I've heard it from other photographers as well, that editorial receives less pay than commercial. So it's less of a revenue generating endeavor for photographers. So
That's
you have to
true.
really love it. And yeah,
Yes, it is
so that has
true.
been my experience for sure.
Yes. But I feel like it's good to have a combination of skills. You
Mhm.
don't only want to do commercial, you don't only want to do editorial. I mean, part of the fun of being creative person is to explore. Of course, you might like one more than the other, but look at you,
Mhm.
Diana. I mean, look at you talk about, about publishing houses. If I ask you about restaurants, you'll be able to tell me. If I ask you about a F&B brand that wants to send you a product, you'll be able to tell me how to operate that. So you are so well versed and well rounded, in the different
Thank
kind of
you.
projects, really. And it comes like not just unless you are absolutely passionate about, I was born to shoot cookbooks, unless you're absolutely passionate about that. I feel like the fun of being a food photographer is exploring all the different avenues that it offers, of being creative. So I love this answer. I have one more question for you, and
Sure, yeah.
that is a bit off topic, but still kind of on topic. And you know how you said that a lot of food bloggers don't shoot their own cookbooks? I mean, I've actually seen more food bloggers not shooting their own cookbooks because not every food blogger is a fantastic photographer. All right.
Mm,
Just like we said that not every photographer is a fantastic cook. So
absolutely.
what if a photographer does want to shoot their cookbook? They do want to create a cookbook. Where do they go? So is there any like one or two things that you would advise, like as a food photographer, if you want to shoot your own cookbook, then what would be the best way to go?
Definitely it helps if you're a great cook. If you it helps to consider ahead of time, who will be doing the cooking and the shooting, and how you yourself will distribute these tasks, or how will you organize yourself. I think that if you want to both develop the recipes and do the cooking and styling and shooting, you have to be extremely well organized for this to happen. I think the best approach would be to batch things 100%. So let's say develop a few recipes, have them fully tested, and then shoot them together as much as possible. If it was me, if it was
Yeah.
me embarking on a project of this sort, that's what I would do. So I would batch the recipe development. And even though I love the styling bit, I would ask someone to come and assist me with the cooking part, kind of like I did with my blogger friend for the barbecue
Mm-hmm.
shoot, where
Mm-hmm.
I gave her ideas and sort of directions on how to style the food, how to sort of prep the food so that it will look what I thought was going to be the best. And then for someone to help with the nitty gritty of cooking, where you don't have to stand over the stove the whole time, because that might be a little overwhelming. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I think it would
Yeah.
be it would be super hard. Again, be super organized and pay attention to your strengths and
Mm-hmm.
choose those as your part in the project, I would say. So
Yeah.
if you're a photographer wanting to do your own cookbook, again, source out the prep, source out I know that some photographers or some authors will source out the editing only. If they enjoy taking their own photos, then maybe just source out the editing of those images. So source out what you don't enjoy so much, do what you're really good at, do the parts that are really close to your heart and what are the
Mm-hmm.
most important for
Mm.
you, and outsource the rest.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, be super organized and have fun.
Yes. Be smart about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that being you mentioned that as photographers we do sort of creative direction a little bit, and art direction and lighting and editing and post-production and this. And I think one thing that I always think about, or I think of myself as, is a project manager. So just getting everyone organized, getting everyone sort of on the same page. I think there's so much of project management in what we do.
Yeah.
And like how I approach my client work always.
Yeah, I think it comes from your librarian experience, Diana.
It's possible. It's
Because
possible.
you are extremely organized, and I have seen how you do it. Every Monday, you have your calendar, your things to do, everything lined up for the week, and that project manager aspect really comes through. And I can tell the art you create and the way you function, it all stems from inherently who you are and all these experiences. It may not have been a fun fact. It's definitely a strong fact and an interesting fact. All right. Well, Diana, this has been a wonderful conversation. And I can tell you, like, cookbook shoots are a kind of mystical subject. Not everybody gets an opportunity to do them. And even when people do, it's such a mixed kind of an experience. So for anyone who has this, project on the table or who has thought about it, I'm sure they've had a lot of questions and a lot of nervousness. And just listening to you today will make them as calm as you are.
Yeah, definitely. This is something that I hope, if nothing else, your listeners walk away with this one thought, that no matter the challenge, you will rise to it one way or another. This challenge will pass, and try your hardest, and you will do it. You'll manage. You'll maybe even excel. So that's what we look for.
And you've clearly shown us that. You've clearly shown us that, Diana.
Thank you.
So
you
tell
so
us,
much,
where can our listeners find you? Where can they see amazing photography?
Oh, my online homes. My portfolio is at dianamuresan.com. I'm on Instagram, though not very frequently these days, but I'm still there. I'm hanging on. I'm hanging on. It's a good place. It can be such an amazing place for community, and that's what I love about it. And there on Instagram, I'm at craft_and_muse. Craft and Muse is the name of my business. So yeah, I write sometimes, I blog, but all of the links can be found in my Instagram profile. I think if anyone was curious, I teach sometimes. I write a newsletter for aspiring food photographers. So those are my online homes.
Fantastic. And we'll have them all linked in the show notes, so they'll know exactly where to come find you. All right. Well, Diana, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for, making the time. And I'm really telling you, if there's anyone who's been thinking of shooting a cookbook, they are virtually giving you a hug right now. So thank you so much for being here today.
You're very welcome. I really appreciate that you had me on. Thank you so much, Diutima. And it was incredibly fun. And my hope always is that I could help one person. I always, wake up with this thought, or for every endeavor, I hope that I could help at least one person. So I hope that's going to be the case with this show too. So thank you so much for having me.
So that was Diana. And tell me that you love this conversation as much as I did. I mean, come on. If you have a cookbook shoot that's on the horizon, you know exactly how to go about it now. And let's say you don't have a cookbook shoot on the horizon, you know exactly how to go and land yourself one such project. I mean, cookbook shoots can be so enriching. They are rewarding. They are soul satisfying. They are extremely creative. And they are very nourishing to our artistic souls. They might not be the most financially lucrative projects, but at the same time, if you ever do a cookbook shoot, which I think every food photographer should do at least one, such project in their entire photography career, so that, you can really get a good sense of what it takes to create something so magnificent that you can hold in your hands and that you can achieve somebody else's vision and you can create someone else's, piece of their heart. It is a really soul nourishing experience and it is extremely creative. It really puts all your skills in place. And I think with Diana's tips, you'll probably, I think you'll most definitely be able to do it like a boss. Because right from asking the correct questions, from pricing to understanding licensing, to approaching the right clients, to also catering for contingencies and making sure that you are credited for your work. We covered the entire spectrum of everything everything important and major that goes into a cookbook shoot. So I hope that this episode has left you empowered and excited about such projects. But of course, if you have any questions, you know where to find me. You can email me at hello@myfoodlens.com, or you can send me a DM on Instagram at Dyutama_myfoodlens. So I'll see you next week with another episode. Until then, bye-bye.